again, welcome everyone to today's webinar, exploring the impact of event registration policy on student engagement in high-risk drinking behaviors. Dr. Joshua Robinson, Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Jacksonville State University, is here to share his research insights. As we get started today, we'd love to be able to welcome you. So could you please type your name, your organization, and the role you play into the chat panel? That would be terrific. And right now I will turn things over to Dr. Lori Hart, Director of Educational Initiatives for Holmes Murphy. She's going to lead today's discussion.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. As I stare at blank boxes and see no one's faces, this is my call to action. If you are available and if you are multitasking, we're great with it. If you are eating lunch, share it. We don't care. Being able to provide good, solid information is good, but we see your faces. See, Liz, good to see you again. Jonathan, all right, we're in. So if you're able to show your faces, it just is so much easier for presenting and making this fun. And if you're multitasking, we're cool with it. We will not call you out. There's no demerits. You don't lose points, anything like that. What a great webinar today. We have a wide group of people who have responded, which says to me we're hitting a question that people have. They got a lot of questions about. So on the call, we have Holmes Murphy clients. We certainly want to welcome them and thank them for their work. We'll be highlighting some Holmes Murphy resources today that are readily available on our website for anyone, but we will be sharing some of those today. And then also we had cast a wide net to our friends, the campus partners, and we are so grateful to see campus partners here, which means this is a question that a lot of us are thinking about. So I want to set the scene, give a history lesson before I turn it over to Josh to kind of give you like, where did event registration come from? So in 1987, the insurance carriers were unsettled because there was lots of lawsuits and people were having to pay out, and the insurance people said, like, this is a problem. And so what do we do in crisis? What still lasts today? What do we do in a crisis? We form a committee. We have a meeting. That's what we all do on a given day. If you have a campus death, let's have a meeting. And so in 1987, there was a meeting, and this meeting was the leadership of some of the NIC organizations, Durward Owen, who passed away this past year from Pi Kappa Phi, other leaders, and they said, let's do something. That was the beginning and the founding of what we call FIPG. The original intent was a fraternity insurance purchasing group. That FIPG lasted for 30 years in our industry, kind of as the industry standard for risk management policies. For some of you, but depending on your age, like you went through the FIPG landscape, you went to conferences, you were given the yellow laminated piece of paper, and everybody just said, we follow FIPG. Well, I was in college when FIPG was formed, to put some dates to this, and then I became a campus professional. So in the 90s, we all kind of have like a standardized policy sitting on college campuses for the first time, and fraternities and sororities were following standardized policies. And when it wasn't working, we had to do something. So what do? We had a meeting. So somewhere in the 90s, event registration really became the task to try to get people to follow the policy. And since I've been hanging out in this space for a very long time, I will tell you that event registration, based on how you've gone through college and based on your undergraduate experience, it is something that philosophically is embedded in you as you go and do your work. If you were in college and there was event registration, let me guess, right now you're doing event registration, because we tend to carry things with us based on how we experienced it in college. So there's event registration. And when we followed event registration into the 90s and 2000s, what we started to hear were words like registered, unregistered, official, unofficial. And we didn't stop the unregistered stuff. We didn't stop the unofficial stuff. It literally became a terminology that is used on college campuses today when I listen to students around how they're hosting the event. And fast forward to 2025 to land the plane, what I will tell you from the Holmes Murphy claims, and for all of you on campuses, I really encourage you to dig into your campus conduct issues. If you right now look at claims or conduct issues, and the majority of them are coming from unregistered, unofficial events, and your alcohol transports are coming from unregistered unofficial events, and your problems are coming from unregistered unofficial events, you need to understand that your system is not working. And so what we really want to do today is unpack some research, engage in a dialogue. We'll share some resources. And the cool news is we've got a new doctor to share this with us. So that's kind of the history lesson. Josh Robinson, who is my friend. I first met Josh when I was on staff with Pi Kappa Phi, and Josh was just a budding little archon, a little chapter president in 2012-13. Now, for those of you who work on campuses or work at headquarters, you know when you meet those presidents, you make a rush level decision about, do I like him? Do I not like him? Is he going to tell the truth? Is he not going to tell the truth? And when I first met Josh, it was like, oh my gosh, I love this guy. Like there was just, if he did anything bad as an archon, I don't want to know. But once he graduated, I had my eye on him. And so we quickly recruited him into a volunteer role, trained in ladder VISC, ASTP, ultimate respect, all the things I was doing in Pi Cap at the time. And so I've gotten to watch Josh grow up. And I asked him as we were prepping for this, I was like, what year did we have a conversation? But he was working on his doctorate, and he said it was about 2019. He looked at me and he said, do you have any dissertation topics? Or maybe I said, sounds more like it. I was like, let me tell you your dissertation topic. And if for any of you getting a doctorate, call me, because I got many topics I can have you study. I think of these things all the time. So I said to Josh, I'm like, why don't you study the impact of behavior based on event registration versus non-event registration? I promise y'all, I had one conversation with him. He never came back to me. I think he said, okay, I'll do that. He was not needy. He just went forth and did the whole thing. And then he emailed me. He's like, oh, I defended my dissertation. I did it. And I'm like, oh, I love you, Josh. So I am thrilled today to have my friend and colleague, Dr. Robinson, with us. He works at Jacksonville State University, has made his career there, and they're some of the greatest students you'll ever meet in America. I stand by that. But he is the dean of students and just a solid human. And so I will now turn it over to him with a little bit of history and a little bit of tee up for the context.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Hart. So I am just going to share with you all a little bit about my research and kind of what we found and what we know about event registration and approval processes. Are you all seeing the actual presentation or the PowerPoint? Cool. So thank you again for coming to this conversation really about the event registration process and what that looks like on college campuses, but also what we know from our research at a particular college in the Southeast United States and kind of what students told us there and how we can apply that in other institutional contexts. So a little bit of background about this. Dr. Hart gave you a good overview of what that looks like. We had a conversation 2019 or 2020, and we talked about the issues that she is seeing in Holmes-Murphy and how we really need to have some research, because there wasn't really a whole lot of research and really evidence to back this practice and policy. So when I started to dig down a little bit, I really did come to learn that there's virtually no research on event registration policies. It is introduced in some of the literature, but it's not. It's just as how often is this occurring? It's a kind of an inventory more so than it is how is the efficacy of this, or does it actually work? And so we know that college drinking, especially high risk drinking, has impacts for both individual students and colleges and universities as a whole. So it's important for us to utilize practices and policies, procedures that are based in evidence and that we are actually able to and willing to enforce. So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing, that we are actually able to enforce these policies and procedures. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about later on is how that's difficult for this specific policy. So what does the literature say? Dr. Hart already gave a great background. She gave a great history lesson. I'm going to kind of add on just a little bit to that. But college student drinking has been in the literature since 1945. It's the earliest that I could find. Of Dr. Clements Collard-Fried noted that while alcohol is accepted as a means of socialization, there should be concern about intoxication among college students Particularly, Fry noted that universities should view alcohol misuse as an issue needing psychiatric care instead of punitive sanctions. So he kind of laid the foundation and the groundwork for how we approach this issue today on most of our campuses of interventions that are not so punitive, but are really educational in nature. And we're trying to come at this as a way of harm reduction and risk reduction. Event registration policies were introduced in the literature in about the 1980s. This literature focused on the frequency of those policies, and again, not the efficacy of them. There have still been no studies to examine this issue. However, during that same time in the 1980s, some legal experts started to warn about the liability of these policies and what they might carry. They cautioned against institutions developing policies that they would not enforce, or the policies they were not willing to enforce vigorously. So they really were talking a lot at that time of liability and how some of these policies, if we're not willing to enforce them to the T, that it adds institutional liability for colleges and universities. For the purposes of this study, we defined high-risk drinking as binge drinking, participating in drinking games, and attending pre-parties. Those are the things that came up over and over again as we were doing a literature review. So that's what I put in there. We're also going to explore the social ecological model and the theory of planned behavior later in this presentation, how that aligns with some of the practices and the things that we found. Had 2 research questions for this study. So the first, is student high-risk drinking behavior different at registered events versus unregistered events? And the second one is, how do students' attitudes and beliefs towards student event registration policies influence their high-risk drinking behavior? So those are the 2 things that we really wanted to focus on. So with this, it was a qualitative case study that I conducted, 2 parts of that. The first was a document analysis, really looking at the policies and procedures at a campus in the Southeast. We gave a pseudonym of Southeastern University. And so you'll hear me and see me refer to Southeastern University. That's the pseudonym for the site of the study. We conducted research and interviews with participants. They did not have to be members of fraternities and sororities, but they did have to plan both registered and unregistered events and attended those events. I will say the vast majority of the participants self-identified as a fraternity or sorority member, and we had representation from IFC, Panhellenic, and NPHC organizations. As far as data collection goes, we did semi-structured interviews, and so we had a list of questions that we asked all students, but we also left it open. That way, if there was an opportunity for a follow-up or for more information, we left that open as well. So now let's get into the actual findings, right? So that's enough background. Let's get into actually what we found. The first is with the document analysis. I found that it was very difficult to find the actual policy. And I never really was able to locate the actual policy for registering events. And I found about 5 different policies related to alcohol and what that looked like. On the website, there were broken links. There were links to old policies. There were policies that contradicted each other. There were policies that were no longer in place at the university. And they all pointed to each other, but they pointed to nowhere at the same time. So there's a flow chart on the left that hopefully helps you understand the confusion that some students might find if they're trying to locate this policy. You see here, you'll see later in my presentation how a lot of students were very confused about what exactly is the policy, what's in it, what's not in it, what are our expectations as far as registration goes. This is likely why, because it was very difficult for me to find this as someone who works at a university and knows kind of where to look. I even requested policies from university officials and did not receive those as well. And so it highlights the importance of having clear expectations for our students and publishing those on our website, doing inventory of our websites to make sure that we don't have old policies or broken links. That way we are setting clear expectations for our students as we are communicating our expectations around alcohol. So what are the findings about this topic and how we approach them? So research question 1, just to remind you, student high-risk drinking behavior, is it different at registered versus unregistered events? We found 3 themes as we were coding the data. 1, we see prevalent high-risk drinking at registered and unregistered events. There really was not a difference in behaviors at either of those events. Good news is we did see some protective factors at those registered events. And so we did see sober monitors, food and non-alcoholic drinks, although there was mixed reviews on if those things actually occurred. but most participants at least acknowledged that most of the time they were there, or they were at least thought about. We also see, again, a limited difference in behavior. So there's no reported difference. We specifically asked, are there differences in behaviors? Most of our participants said, no, not really. And we see maybe an unintended consequence here of larger registered events versus unregistered events. We kind of see the idea that, we have to jump through a lot of hoops. There's a lot of red tape. And so if we're going to have a registered event, we're going to make it worth it. We're going to make it worth our time. And we're going to have a large blowout event that actually was higher risk in nature than some of the unregistered events that were discussed. So some specific quotes. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I did want to pull some up on the screen. That way you could see them and read them for yourselves. But I'm going to highlight just a couple of these. So one participant shared that registered events, she was talking more towards fraternities, were for women, and that fraternities use the number of women who attend their events as a recruiting tool to recruit more men to join. Another participant noted that while there are no perceived rules at unregistered events, people likely engage in behaviors that violate policies at registered events and just do what they want anyway. Another participant said, I've never really seen them enforce it super hard because, we're supposed to have water and food at every event, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. You just forget it. And then finally, I guess generally registered parties are going to be a whole lot bigger and a lot more fun because we could just have people come by, people know about it and the school is able to know about it. So it's not an underground event. And so there's this idea that we don't have to hide this event. The school knows about it. Everybody else can know about it. We can promote it. And so they're going to be a lot larger and a lot more risky. Again, we see a dissonance between policy and student behavior. So some students said, I have two quotes here that I want to highlight. When we asked about how do people behave at these events, the students said they behave the same. They just operate within whatever limits they have, which is usually, even if the event is registered, there's people breaking the rules anyways. Not necessarily the host or the organizations, just people who are attending the events. They decide that they want to do something else. And then there are people who are following the rules. But usually people they're going to kind of operate within where they want to be anyway. Just when it's an unregistered event, maybe the only behavior change is that they're not hiding it. And then finally, I don't feel any different in unregistered versus registered parties. Personally, I feel like I could go to an unregistered event and feel like it's a registered event and vice versa. I really don't think I would have a clue. So again, these events they look very similar to each other, and they're not, students aren't really perceiving them as any different. It's just kind of a formality that they're having to go through. Research question 2 again was, how do students' attitudes and beliefs towards student event registration policies influence their high-risk drinking behavior?
Hey, Josh, can I ask
So
a
we do
question?
see, absolutely.
When we say students, and I heard who came to this, was there a difference if you looked at officers and knowledge, or were you just looking at students and asking the question?
So these were actually students. One of the requirements of the study was that you had to have planned both a registered and an unregistered event and attended one.
Okay.
So these were people that were planning the events.
Okay, thank you.
In general.
You said that, but I needed that again. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we see that there is policy support among students. So that's good news. Students acknowledge that there need to be some parameters for student safety, and they're willing to work within those parameters. Within guidelines, we do see some that say, I think it's important for us to have these policies, but I just, some of it's too much. Generally, there is a positive outlook though. And so students want to support student safety. They want to make sure that their events are safe, but they just are looking for clear guidelines. They're looking for things that they perceive as reasonable. We also see a lack of policy knowledge. So we see that one of two things, or sometimes both, students misunderstand the policy. They kind of get confused on old policy, what used to be, or what is procedure versus what's an actual policy, what's a good idea versus what's policy. There's a lot of confusion there. And then there's limited knowledge of the policy. And so some students just said, you know what, I'm not sure. I don't know what that policy actually looks like. I don't know what the requirements are when we're hosting events. We also see, again, that dissonance between policy and student behavior, limited consequences, and motivation to host unregistered. So we see that some students say, it's just too much work to host a registered event. We're just going to host an unregistered event. We're going to have it be an unofficial event. We're going to host it either off campus or some other site, and we're just not going to tell the university about it. That way we don't have to go through these hoops. And in their mind, it's not registered, so we don't have to follow these rules. So again, some participant quotes to kind of highlight some of these things. One for policy support. One participant said they did not perceive organizations felt compelled to register off-campus parties, even if an organization hosted them. So they also said that university does not ensure that student groups outside of fraternity and sorority life know about the event registration process, and said that I think we tell our students that there's a process that you can go through to get these approved, but we're not specific with groups outside of fraternity and sorority life of what that actually looks like. Another student said, I think the policies are needed. Even if every organization doesn't follow these policies to a T, maybe they get away with it, but I believe having these policies makes it safer. And then a student said the idea, basically brought up the idea of a loophole or an unofficial events. The student said, in regards to pre-games, I guess pre-games aren't technically registered, especially if there's no party after. Sometimes we'll just text those sororities and we'll say, hey, we're just doing a pre-game at the fraternity, come at, 8 o'clock or something like that. And that's not registered at all through the school. And so as they continue to talk, they talked about how those policies weren't enforced. And there was this idea that those policies weren't even required for those unofficial, unregistered events. Finally, again, we're going to see that dissonance between policy and student behavior. So one student said, normally the school is not very strict with our parties and they never get denied or anything like that. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I know you're not allowed to have kegs, like a beer keg, but we still end up having those, even though it's pretty sure technically against policy because they've never had it, but they've never had an issue with it before. There was also this idea that the university required pre-event meetings with student organizations before they had and hosted the events. Students said that rarely ever happened. And then another student said, I don't really feel any different at unregistered versus registered events. I don't think I could tell the difference. I don't think that students behave any differently at these functions. So let's bring it all together and talk about what does this actually look like. Let's bring in, this is kind of me compiling all of the findings and putting them on one slide. So one, there is lack of policy accessibility, and the failure to host meetings and coupled with that lack of policy accessibility likely contributes to the prevalence of high-risk drinking behaviors at Southeastern University. High-risk drinking was identified both at registered and unregistered events, and there's consistent behaviors described at both of those. High-risk drinking includes the prevalence of drinking games, binge drinking, and pre-parties associated with registered and unregistered events. I would also like to add that it was very common, and it seems like the norm on this campus, for organizations at registered events to provide alcohol to attendees. So organizations would buy liquor and beer and then provide that to attendees at the event. All participants supported the idea of event registration policies as they related to student safety, right? And so they all are supportive of student safety, but some are skeptical of specific elements of those policies. Again, there's too much red tape. There's too much bureaucracy, in one student's words. There's too many hoops to jump through. Participants could not clearly articulate the policies and the specific elements of the policies. Many participants mentioned that the students choose not to follow policies and that some parts of the policies are unrealistic in the students' minds. And again, we do see an unintended consequence of registered events becoming larger and riskier because of the idea that students feel that they have to jump through all of these hoops, go through all this red tape. If they're going to do that, they're going to make it worth it in their minds. So what are some implications for universities, fraternities and sororities, anybody that deals with college students and is trying to address the drinking issue on college campuses? First is to reconsider event registration policies. And so based off of the results of this study, do they actually work? Are they doing what we want them to do? Are we doing what we think they should be doing? Are they creating unintended consequences of making our events that are registered larger and riskier? Are they driving events off campus, which we know increase the risk of our students and those events? Are students trying to find loopholes, those types of things? So really evaluating the event registration policies and the process behind those. Second, ensuring policies are easily accessible. We want to make sure that students have those policies at their fingertips so that they can clearly understand them. It's really hard to hold somebody accountable to something that we've never told them or that we don't clearly communicate to them, right? And so on a campus, If we make it difficult to find the policy, it's really difficult for us to have a meaningful conversation with that student later on, because the students can say, you never gave me this. I couldn't find it. It's not on your website. How was I supposed to know? And then third, we want to utilize theoretical frameworks to address high-risk drinking. We have a lot of resources that I'm going to go into here in a second, a lot of theoretical frameworks. And then there's resources through Holmes Murphy Fraternal Practice. There's resources through the College AIM. There's resources, in various places that we can look at to what are actually evidence-informed practices that we can implement on our campuses and within our organizations. So first, let's look at the theory of planned behavior. We know that attitudes, subjective norms, and perceived behavioral control all influence intention, which then leads to behavior. And then perceived behavioral control also has a direct link to behavior as well. So in the context of this study, if we're on a campus or we're leading an organization, we need to challenge permissive attitudes. And so we need to make sure that if there are permissive attitudes around high-risk drinking, we need to challenge those. A lot of times we do those with social norms campaigns. We do those with correcting those misperceived norms, which is that second point. We need to work to correct misperceived norms, that this is normal and that all college students engage in these activities and that it is accepted behavior within the organization or the campus context. Third, educate students about harm reduction and risk reduction strategies. And so really having meaningful conversations with students about how they can reduce their risks at the organizations and even at the individual level. Those actions will hopefully lead to and influence students' intentions related to drinking, which then leads to reduced high-risk drinking behaviors. So we need to kind of scaffold our approach in this way to really be intentional about challenging permissive attitudes, correcting misperceived norms, educating students, which then will lead to intention, which then leads to behavior. The other thing that we like to talk about within this context of alcohol prevention is the social ecological model. So we know as we are addressing a public health problem, which this was, college high-risk drinking was deemed a public health problem by the United States Surgeon General. So we know that when we do this, we have to look at all of these factors. We have to look at individual, interpersonal, institutional, and community. So with individual level interventions and procedures, we need to be looking at knowledge, skills, abilities of individual students, right? And so some of the recommendations here are to implement a social norms education campaign, offer skills training programs, offer brief motivational interventions, and then other educational programs and interventions such as PFI, PNF, et cetera. So as you can see, if you're familiar with College AIM, a lot of these are coming from College AIM. Others are coming from research that is identified in the literature review of this study. When we're looking at interpersonal, we're looking at group dynamics, right? So the culture of the organization. So implement bystander intervention programs, implement alcohol skills training programs. At the institutional level, so whether that be a national headquarters or a campus, reconsider those event registration policies, implement industry standard policies, such as the one that Holmes Murphy Fraternal Practice has, enforce minimum drinking ages, audit and assess policies on a regular basis, develop a host training program, a party host training program to really teach participants how do you host an event that is in line with our policies and procedures, and then consistently enforce policies. At the community level, we want to collaborate with local stakeholders to enforce minimum drinking age and include stakeholders in policy development. So I do want to acknowledge some limitations of the study. One, it's a single site study, and so we know that behavior and environments matter. And so again, that's right below that environmental context. So we do want to use some caution to apply this to all campus contexts. However, we do feel that it is useful for most campus contexts, and we'll explain why here in a second. And then also this is self-reported data. So it does rely on self-reported data, which could be skewed towards perceived desirable behaviors, right? And so we want to keep that in mind as we have these results as well. When we're looking at limitations, we also want to acknowledge that the case study does achieve generalizability through analytical generalization, which is described by Yin as corroborating, rejecting, or otherwise advancing theoretical concepts referenced in designing the case study. So analytical generalization evaluates the case to add empirical context to theoretical principles. So with that, we do corroborate many of the theoretical concepts that we've identified, actually most of them that we identified throughout the study. We corroborate that specific elements of increased risk for off-campus parties, including driving under the influence, deteriorating relationships with the community, teaching students how to do these things, tarnishing the reputation of the institution, etc. We also corroborate that alcohol policies may have unintended consequences. So we know that if they're not carefully designed, there might be things that occur that we do not want to occur, and that's a direct result of a policy that may not be designed in the best way. We also corroborate and advance the theory of planned behavior and the social ecological model as well. So thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hart for a conversation about resources.
All right, we're going to pause here. Like, a lot of this stuff lined up with what I thought I would see, and then a lot of it I was like, oh, really? Oh, wait, I didn't know that. Are you allowed to tell us what school?
No.
Will you tell
And
me?
so that is
Everybody's
that was part
going,
of my IRB.
yeah, I know. I know. Are there any questions thus far? I'm going to show you all some things. Any questions, any insights, any thoughts? You're welcome to unmute.
I had a question, and I apologize if you already mentioned this. In the study, was there any, like, so that where the locations of these events are happening? Because like, I feel like a house party, right, it might be a different culture than a formal that's off campus at a third party venue. And so in your study, was there any like control, I guess, for that or standardization?
So their students did tell us a little bit about all of those things, right? And so they talked about events at chapter houses, off-campus events, and events at bars. The events at bars, they did say we saw pretty consistent behaviors at all of them. So even at the bars at third-party locations, there doesn't seem to be a lot of controls, and the bar and the third party itself didn't seem to care to control those behaviors. And so we saw consistency across those events.
Any other questions, insights, thoughts? All right, I'm going to share away. For some of you, you're going to be like, no, she's not. She is not going to do this again, but I'm going to do this again. Like when Josh pulled up the social ecological model, it gives me tingles. I'm like, yes, this is a good way to do recommendations and problem analysis. So in the world of Holmes Murphy and also in the world of Lori Hart Catalyst, this is a double conversation here for me because I do it in two different levels at campuses and then with our clients. How I have learned to describe the great word of liability is by saying the following. Like, students love to say, we're liable, we don't care. Advisors, especially women, I'll drag in the women here, they love to, you're liable. Like, if you have certain university attorneys, like, they love to say the word, and we're always like, what does one mean by that? But this word gets thrown around a lot. Here's the framework for which I want you to leave this conversation because Josh mentioned, that word. What we say versus what we do, what we find in a deposition, in a lawsuit, and a payout is the bigger the gap, the bigger the liability. So when you're thinking about from the lens of my campus, when you're thinking about the lens from I write the policies for my national fraternity, what you write is going to be the thing that you are deposed on. And so one of the clear things that I recognize that I was like, if I was in a sorority meeting, I'm like, ditto with Josh, was the fact that he digs into a campus policy, finds broken links, finds it in multiple different places. The students can't find it. Like, when we do the work, we have to think of the student as the client, and it should be an easy process. Like, this should not be difficult. I did some work one time at a campus where they would do an internship or co-op and then come back to the campus. They'd do a co-op and come back to the campus. And one of the students said to me, I just did a co-op with like Apple, and I come back to campus and I can't even figure out how to reserve a table. Like, it's so layered and broken. A lot of the systems that we have in place are layered and broken, and you've acquired them. And I'm looking at several of you that I've talked to this week that are like, I just walked into this thing. Part of your work is not to start new. Part of your work is to undo. And so kind of think about that. All the things that you all have written that you are not doing, you need to get rid of it. And a lawyer will agree with you. Your university lawyer, when you go and say, this is all written, we're not doing any of this, that lawyer will be your friend because they understand what the gap looks like. This is a systems way of thinking. I developed this over time with my friends when I worked for Pi Kappa Phi. So there was a lot of brain collective work that we did around public health issues. But I carry it with me. If I could go back in time, I would be a supply chain management major or something, because when people try to look at a problem like event registration, like Josh did, like it's hard because it all starts to feel like it's in one bucket. And if you really want to do this work, part of the work is you have to unpack it as your philosophy drives your policies, drives your procedures, drives your education, drives your enforcement. And so you've got to start unpacking it in the form of 5 buckets. I work with clients right now. This is an example. This is actually a pretty short one. It's a 35-page document that says nothing. And it has a little bit of philosophy in here, a little bit of policy, a little bit of procedure. It's a bunch of nonsense. What I will tell you is if something happens, this client will get deposed on this whole thing. And every lawyer will treat a big fat document like it's a policy. And so it's really clear in your work that everything is kind of segmented out. So what's the difference? Philosophy, we don't have time to talk about it much today, but philosophy is really how you approach the problem. And when you go work for someone, you need to ask, well, how do you philosophically believe in students? How do you do the work with students? For some of you out there, you're compliant-based people because you grew up in a compliant-based world. For others of you, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I'm a relationship-based person because that's just how I grew up in the world of sorority and fraternity. I see Liz on here. I know that she is like a kindergarten teacher who now's at Penn State. So I'm like, she has the greatest philosophy of all. You need to sit down, you need to be nice to each other, and you need to turn around. Like that's a philosophy. And I'm like, this philosophy, like don't lose your kindergarten knowledge as you do the work. But everybody, but she's also working with Grace, who's on the call, who's like a forensic scientist, right? Like, and Grace is like, everyone is guilty, you know, like jokingly, but like everybody comes with packaged with how I see the world and the problem and the work. And oftentimes we sit in risk management rooms and spaces and we are collectively disagreeing. If you grew up as an NPH member, undergraduate member, you philosophically see the world as cease and desist, because that is how you were treated at the undergraduate level. So understand philosophy drives all the work that we do. And anytime you are working together collectively, how you approach the problem is going to be critical as the leaders. That then drives policy. Josh hit on a lot of this good stuff. Why is policy important? If your members don't understand them, they're not going to follow them. If your members can't find it, they're not going to follow them. And if you got 5, and Josh, like I saw some of your faces, you're like, wait, there's all these different links out there. Trust me, I troll a lot of your campuses. This is not unusual. Hang up the phone or hang up on this call and start Googling and you'll be shocked at what you see. I worked with a campus one time on this. They had 7 different policies out there. One of the policies told me I could have beer and donuts at the tailgate on Saturday morning. Like, and the university was clueless that all this stuff was sitting out there. Every word scrutinized. This is your deposition. If something happens, if something says policy, they're going to walk you through it and look for the gaps. You're going to be held accountable for enforcing or not enforcing. In the world of Holmes Murphy, when FIPG was going away, I was on the NIC Alcohol and Drug Guideline Committee, if any of you remember this, and the alcohol and drug guidelines are still sitting on the NIC website. I served on that committee with 4 other people. We did alcohol and drug guidelines. We cleaned it off. We dusted it off. It's good policy language. We checked with every attorney out there who does litigation work and said, just give us the goods. I also then continued on and wrote, once I became a quote unquote fake policy expert, because I just went to all my policy friends and said, tell me everything you know. So our Holmes Murphy risk management template, we will send you these links. It really is a solid risk management template in good policy language. If you hear nothing else today, hear this. You should not form a committee and send policy work out to people. People don't know how to write policy, and then it becomes everyone's opinion, and that's how documents get nasty. You should start with a template of good policy language, because that policy is what you get deposed on. That sits on our website. We'll also send you those links. We also, on our website, have a code of conduct template, as well as I know Dyad Strategies has a code of conduct template. ASCA has a code of conduct template. You don't have to start from scratch on this stuff. Also, after the Roe v. Wade overturn, there were some questions around amnesty and retaliation. And so I worked with the Piazza Center on an amnesty policy template. The whole point of an amnesty policy is to ensure that people call. Right now, your amnesty policies are crap. And it's like, you may get amnesty. Well, students are reading that, and that's impacting their decisions to help people. And then for people who give amnesty once a year, I'm like, well, then why would I call the second time? Right? What if I am a high-risk person and I'm around someone who needs medical attention, but I've read now that if I call, I won't get amnesty? I'm not calling. Like, this is how the 20-year-old risky drunk brain is going to be thinking. So this amnesty stuff, it walks you through a committee work around how to write a solid amnesty policy. We actually give you the options here. I love that what we did was in our template work was we embedded kind of that social norm campaign that Josh referenced of, hey, here's what amnesty is. If you want amnesty, you're going to do 3 things. You're going to call 911, you're going to continue to remain, and you're going to cooperate. You don't do those things, you don't get amnesty. This moves student behavior into the right direction, which is what good policies should be doing. That then leads to procedures. And what I love about procedures is they're good ideas, they're best practices, they're recommendations. It's all those references, that college aim matrix, like the CDC, it's all the experts out there. Sexual Violence Resource Center, all of these people out there who have resources, these are all just good ideas. These are prevention practices. And how you want to use these things are not written in must language, but in good ideas. And students who want to reduce risk, sometimes they don't care if it's a policy or a prevention strategy. What they care about is they want to take care of people. So if your philosophy is we're going to take care of people, here's the rules, here's some prevention strategies, the good students are going to do it. Not the ones that are never going to do it. But you can't get deposed on procedures if you do it correctly. Now, for those of you, and you heard in Josh's research, like it said I was supposed to register, and then it said I was supposed to meet with someone, and then I often didn't meet with someone. There's the gap. The university said, I'm going to meet with you. I didn't meet with you, and now Tammy's dead. Guess what the gap is? The school had a duty. The school didn't follow up on their duty for their procedure. And now the school's going to be sitting at that table. Everything you write, you need to think about how it plays out if you do or if you don't do it. That leads to education. All of the lawyers that we work with basically say if you're consistently doing the work and educating and you're documenting who's in the room, all of that stuff matters. If you are consistently doing education work on policies, on procedures, you also need to be documenting who is in there as well. That also matters when they get to conduct, that you're like, hey, Sam, we saw you this like 2 weeks ago. You were in the session with us. Like, where's your gap here? I will also say, though, if you are not educating consistently, and by consistently, I mean every semester, please don't expect the students to know anything. Like, it has to be done every single semester. Oftentimes, risk managers are elected every semester. Oftentimes, they're freshmen. How do I know? Because I have a son who was a freshman who was elected risk manager. And I was like, what in the living word? However, the school he was at he has been to more like nonsensical, beautiful trainings. He's like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me? I'm like, I did. You don't listen. But consistent education is going to be key, because what the gap cannot be is when they get to conduct that they didn't know. What kind of Josh referenced of, well, they haven't told us the rules. It's got to be ongoing. We have a lot of educational tools on Holmes Murphy. This is what, if you go to Holmes Murphy Fraternal, you're going to kind of dig into our templates, tools, and then also how to plan safe events. All of this stuff is here. We're pretty, whether you're a client or not, what we want is for you all to use the resources, because safer campuses mean safer chapters, mean safer national organizations. So you are welcome to use these things. Also, the event planner app for Holmes Murphy. If you go to the event planner, if you just go to your local app store, Android, or however you do it, type in HM Event Planner, Holmes Murphy Event Planner. This is a free tool for students to plan safe events. We don't keep a copy of it. We don't approve it. Everybody sees this. They're like, let's approve. I'm like, why don't you help them plan? Like, this is a whole education. You can literally have a program where you say, here is our policy, and let's help you plan safe events. And you can leave and you've done far more than you need. I mean, like, you've done the work. Students who want to do good, because the philosophies are we want to keep people safe in our community, they will listen to this. This links back to all of our resources. It helps them plan dry events for our students whose national organizations do not allow for events. It defines what a drive-in is. In case you forget, you can't drink in your car and go inside. That then leads to how to build a guest list, event monitor, resources, crisis plans, prevention planning, all the things in here. They can PDF that to the officers. They can PDF a plan to the members, free resource. Alcohol 101 Plus, this is not our tool, but we love the friends of Alcohol 101 Plus. This is a cost-free, that means free, free digital alcohol education for students. It is a solid 1-hour program. It is based on your weight, your height. Like you can literally walk through and say on a given night, here's what I did. And then it has this odd thingy avatar that helps you like, oh, well, no wonder I felt like that or whatever. But they also have their brand new virtual bar that's on the App Store. This can all be used in education. If you're a campus person, if you're a headquarters person, y'all need to be doing this work, and it has to be done consistently. This is free of charge stuff. We will be sending all of this to you, just so you know. That then leads to enforcement on the Holmes-Murphy. Again, I referenced websites. Like, for conduct to be fair, the student needs to walk in and say, yes, I was at Dr. Robinson's training. Yes, he gave me the information. Yes, I knew the rules. And yes, I chose to break the rules. Then you at least have a better sanction versus a student walking in who said, I did not know it. I could not find it. You know who should be sanctioned? You. Like, not the student who can't find the document. So thinking through how to walk through these buckets is going to be critical. Now I'm going to stop that share and I'm going to pause and say, what questions do we have now? Because I've highlighted Josh's research and kind of a systems way of thinking. We will send you these resources. Oh, Bobby has also linked them because she is brilliant in the note in the section. What questions do you have? I'm going to give one more example of how I'm doing that. Bobby, will you throw the diversity scholar? Oh, hey, Liz, will you throw the diversity scholarship in? Thank you. All right, Liz, what's up?
So we are going from a dry campus to now policies around alcohol. One of the pushbacks we're getting from our college attorneys is a lot about, can you guys hire people to be the bartenders? And who's going to check the IDs? Can you hire people? Like this distrust in the students to be able to handle that. How do we work around that when we're getting really pushed back from our attorneys to not do that?
Attorneys show up with their philosophies as well. And it's funny, when I've gone to work with campuses, I find myself arguing with attorneys about that just because you did that in college does not mean this is how this translates after law school. Like, it is very interesting how they pack it too with them. Liz, can you remind me where you are? Like,
University of Georgia.
Where?
North Georgia.
North Georgia. I was like, I need you to be at a private liberal arts school, but yes, you're at North Georgia. Well, okay, so let me flip this back. Like, my son is at University of Tennessee. It is in Knoxville. There is a plethora of third-party vendors who offer servicing. Plethora. They are kind of approved and vetted by the institution. I'm not saying these people do not serve people underage, because I think I saw that at an event, like I did, but they can do that and it actually works. And I was actually shocked. I went to a parents event. I was not an undergrad event. It was a parent event, people. My son got very upset because he found one small bottle of liquor. And I was like, oh yeah, they're actually, like, he was doing some good enforcement because the environment allows him to have licensed third-party vendors. Does Dahlonega, Georgia, from a practical standpoint, have licensed and insured third-party vendors that could match that?
We do. It's costing our groups a lot of money, and we'd like to get to a BYOB policy if possible. That's our goal. But the kickback we're getting from attorneys, and I'm just like, I'm not quite sure, because I'm used to just being able to trust the students to manage the event based on the headquarters policy, our policy, Godspeed. But what kind of answer do we give back for policies in regards to something like that? Or any recommendations? Or do we just we can't do BYOB, we should go to just third party?
Is this all happening from COVID when they were all out in the roads and made the national news? Because y'all used to have BYOB.
I don't want to talk about it. That was before I got here. Allison, back me up. Allison.
I mean, because you used to, like, back in the day, I'd been up there and y'all were BYOBing. I mean, like, y'all were following. Let me send y'all some ideas.
Okay.
Because you're not dealing with event registration, you're dealing with lawyers. But I think
Correct. The administration's on board to get it together. Yes, they did do that illegal party. That was before my time. They shouldn't have done the BYOB either because they only had third-party vendor at the time. But yes, they've got a bunch of row houses near each other that they can all have like a block party.
yeah, and there was an initiative out there many years ago called the Amethyst Initiative. And Dr. McCardle, John McCardle, thank you, it came to my head. I remember sitting on a panel with him, and it was like all old men who were very smart. And he was like, "Why are you on the panel?" I'm like, "Maybe they just needed a woman. I don't know." I joked with him, but I literally became the translator because they were saying very important things, and people were like, "What?" But he always says, when policy does not meet practice, when policies do not meet practice, it is time as educators for us to understand practice and develop policies around the practice. And so this is you're in a fight with lawyer, and this happens a lot. Like, honestly, like lawyers just say it has to be this way, and then they start saying liability, and I'm like, no. So let me send you some examples and like some thoughts to ask
Okay.
about that, because I feel like this is
Thank you.
one conversation you and I have had now that I'm like talking to you. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
But lawyers, I mean, a classic example, and I don't mind telling the school, like Lehigh University, lots of policies out there. They said, let's redo all the work. And I had the lawyers, and they were like, we can only have events Thursday, Friday, and Saturday here, registered events. If y'all know Lehigh, they have a Monday, for breakfast. I'm like, they like gather. It's a very social place. So they created all these policies of the work that Josh is researching, that you can only have an event for 4 hours. So they had groups registering events from 8 to 12, 1 to 5, 6 to 10, because they didn't have a limit on the number. So I was like, what's the deal with the 4 hours? They were like, I don't know. Deborah said so. I'm like, who's Deborah? And I'm like, she's dead. I'm like, okay. So let's pass that along, right? So instead of creating now 3 events, now they could register an event for 6 hours, which was more reasonable for them, right? Like if you're watching a football game or if you're having a band, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, this is where their lawyers were just stomped. And they were like, Lori, we're only doing it. It looks good. Like it's a better image. It sounds better to the board. So I was in the room with all the lawyers, and I said, hey, have you ever driven by a fraternity house and seen an event on Monday? And the guy's like, yes. The next, have you seen an event on Tuesday? Yes. Have you seen? I just went through every lawyer. I'm like, that's your deposition. You know it's happening and you haven't stopped it. And so to Josh's reference of that research is what you write, you must enforce. And this is for all of you to consider. Why are you creating rules above the federal law? If you create rules as an institution or an organization above the federal law, you will be asking the court when there is a claim, issue, or challenge, you're above the federal law, so how did you enforce it? Now, and Jack's State is a really good partner, Josh. Like they've always just kind of followed industry standard. They said all student organizations are going to follow industry standard as it relates to what was FIPG, now the NIC alcohol and drug guidelines. It's consistent for every student organization. Florida State does the same thing. And essentially it just says, follow the federal law. And here's the rules around how you follow the federal law. That's all like good alcohol policies do, is here's how to manage a system to follow the federal law. And it allows, I think, for equity on a campus, because the chess club can't do what Pi Kappa Phi can't do. We also don't want students pouring alcohol down other people's throats. But if the law is above the federal law, then that means you, Liz and Allison, are responsible for enforcing something above the federal law that puts North Georgia closer to the table. And so maybe we can chat to help y'all go armed up with information in there. But for all of you there, I mean, just considerations of when policy doesn't meet practice. These are the things I've learned from smart people. What's the practice and how do we look at that? And if we're developing something above the federal law, why? And what are you doing to enforce that? No, that's good. Any other questions? And while I'm waiting for people, Home Smart People right now has a diversity scholarship open. We're still using the word and we love the word. So the diversity scholarship, it is $10,000. This is our 4th year. So this will be $40,000 that we've awarded to Holmes Murphy clients. Applications are open till November 15th. If you have questions on who Holmes Murphy clients are, you can pop a note to Bobby and myself. We'll send you a list. The only way our students know about this is if you pass it on and pass it down to them. So if you would please consider, and we'll email you this also, grabbing that scholarship and passing it on. We do have, for reference, we have 7 NPC organizations, a lot of NIC groups. We have all 9 of the MPHC organizations, a ton of the multicultural groups. So that kind of gives you a framework for who our clients are.
It's 10 $1,000 scholarships. So there'll be 10 recipients and the deadline is November 1st.
This is why we have Bobby. She keeps me in line. I even wrote that thing and I can't remember what I said. 10 1,000, not 10 10,000. Any other questions? We're hopping at 2. We got 3 minutes. Any questions? Was this helpful for the people that I can see? Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. Well, Josh, or we will say Dr. Robinson, who now will never write a thank you note or a letter or anything again, an article. I'm just kidding. He is done. Josh, we are so proud of you. And thanks for giving us a body of work that will help drive future conversations. Josh, he does have all of your emails. So if you hear from him, you're welcome to reach out to him. You got our team here if you need us. We will follow up with the recording and all the resources captured in a couple days. And thanks for being here. We appreciate you.